My name is Marcus Anderson, and I've been the broke one in my family for 7 years. It started the day I told them I was leaving my corporate banking job to start my own financial consulting firm. Dad actually laughed. Not a chuckle, a full, head-thrown-back laugh. Consulting, he'd said, wiping his eyes. That's what people call unemployment when they're too proud to admit it. My older brother Derek had just bought his second investment property. My younger sister Claire was a VP at a pharmaceutical company. And I was about to become, in Dad's words, a guy with a laptop and dreams. He wasn't entirely wrong. That first year, I made $47,000. I lived in a one-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood Dad called Transitional. I drove a 10-year-old Civic. I bought generic cereal. But I was building something. My consulting firm specialized in creative financing solutions for mid-sized construction companies. I'd spent 6 years in commercial lending and saw the same problem repeatedly. Good companies with solid projects couldn't get traditional bank financing because their collateral didn't fit neat boxes. So I created a different model. I'd evaluate projects based on projected cash flow, not just assets. I'd structure deals that let companies take on larger contracts without overextending. And I'd connect them with private capital sources willing to take calculated risks. Within 2 years, I had 12 clients. Within 3, I had 47. Within 4 years, I had $89 million in assets under management. I didn't tell my family. Not because I was hiding, at least, not at first. But because every Sunday brunch became a referendum on my life choices, and I got tired of defending myself. Still consulting? Dad would ask, that emphasis on the word making it sound like a disease. Still at it, I'd reply. Must be nice, making your own hours, Claire would say in a tone that meant, must be nice, not having real responsibilities. Derek would talk about his rental income, his property appreciation, his equity positions. Dad would beam with pride. And I'd eat my eggs Benedict and say nothing. The turning point came 3 years ago. Anderson Construction, Dad's company, the family legacy, his pride and joy, hit a rough patch. A major project fell through. A client declared bankruptcy owing them $800,000. Their credit line maxed out. Dad was panicking. I watched him age 5 years in 2 months. He never asked me for help. Why would he? I was the broke one. Instead, he applied for a business loan. Got rejected by 4 banks. Each rejection made him more desperate, more angry, more likely to take whatever terms he could get. That's when I stepped in. Not as his son. As a financial consultant. I set up a shell company, Apex Capital Solutions, and had my business partner Jennifer make the approach. She presented Dad with an offer, a $4.2 million revolving credit line at 6.5% interest. Flexible terms. No prepayment penalties. Access to additional capital if needed. Dad thought he'd won the lottery. Finally, a lender who understands construction, he told the family at Sunday brunch. These Apex people get it. Not like those corporate banks who don't understand real business. I sipped my coffee and said nothing. The credit line saved Anderson Construction. Dad took on bigger projects. Hired more crews. Expanded into commercial development. Within 18 months, the company was thriving. And every Sunday, he'd talk about his brilliant business acumen. How he'd navigated the crisis. How he'd found the right partners. You should take notes, Marcus, he'd say. This is how you build real wealth. I'd smile. I'm learning a lot. The truth was, I was managing Dad's entire credit facility. Every draw he made, every payment he missed, every covenant he came close to breaching, I saw it all. I restructured terms when he needed breathing room. I approved extensions when projects ran long. I kept his company afloat while he thought he was doing it himself. Why? Honestly, at first it was because he was my father and his company was in trouble. The deal made financial sense. Anderson Construction was fundamentally sound, just temporarily strapped. But as the years went on, as the Sunday brunches continued, as the comments piled up, I realized something else. I wanted to see if success would humble him. If maybe, once the crisis passed and the company stabilized, he'd look around and wonder who else might be struggling. Who else might need help? Who else might be building something that didn't fit his narrow definition of success? He never did. If anything, The turnaround made him more arrogant, more dismissive, more convinced that his way was the only way. Real estate, Marcus, he'd lecture. That's real wealth. Not consulting fees. Not moving money around. Actual assets you can touch. Derek would nod. Dad's right. You should really think about buying property. Maybe when I can afford it, I'd say. They'd exchange glances. Poor Marcus. Still broke. Still renting. Still not getting it. Meanwhile, my consulting firm was managing $127 million across 63 clients. My personal portfolio was worth $8.3 million. I owned equity stakes in 4 construction companies, including a 12% position in a firm that was about to be acquired for $90 million. I lived in a rented apartment because I traveled 40 weeks a year and didn't want to maintain a property. I drove a Civic because I didn't care about cars. I bought generic cereal because it tasted the same and cost less. But to them, these were signs of failure. Of not understanding real wealth. Jennifer thought I was crazy for not telling them. Marcus, you're essentially subsidizing your father's entire operation while he calls you broke every Sunday. Why? Because, I'd explained, I want to understand what we're really dealing with. Is this about me? Or is this about something deeper in how they see the world? The answer became increasingly clear. It wasn't that they wanted me to fail. It was that they needed a reference point. Someone to be less than so they could be more than. I was the broke one so Derek could be the successful one. I was the struggling consultant so Claire could be the accomplished VP. I was the renter so Dad could be the real estate mogul. My actual success would disrupt the entire family narrative. So I stayed quiet. I documented every comment, every assumption, every lecture about wealth from people who didn't know I was managing more capital than they'd see in their lifetimes. I wasn't hiding. I was watching. And I was waiting to see how long it would take for someone, anyone, to ask a single question about my actual business instead of assuming they knew. They never did. Until the Sunday brunch that changed everything. The restaurant was Dad's choice, an upscale place downtown where he knew the owner. He always made a show of being recognized, of getting the best table, of ordering for the table without asking what anyone wanted. We'll take the eggs Benedict all around, he announced. And champagne. We're celebrating. Celebrating what? Mom asked. Anderson Construction just won the bid for the Riverside Development Project, Dad said proudly. $42 million contract. Biggest in company history. Everyone applauded. Derek raised his glass. Claire took photos for Instagram. This is what real business looks like, Dad said, looking directly at me. Not consulting. Not moving papers around. Building something concrete. Something that lasts. Congratulations, I said. That's a significant contract. You know what made it possible? Dad continued. The credit line from Apex Capital. That facility gave us the credibility to bid on major projects. That's the power of real financing relationships. I took a sip of water. Derek leaned back. I closed on another duplex last week. 4th property. Combined rental income is now $11,000 a month. That's fantastic, Mom said. Marcus, Derek said, turning to me with what he probably thought was helpful concern. You really should think about real estate. Even just a small condo. Building equity beats throwing money away on rent. I'll consider it, I said. You've been considering it for 7 years, Dad interjected. At some point, consideration becomes avoidance. You're afraid of commitment. Of real investment. Claire nodded. It's a mindset thing. Some people think small, stay small. That's exactly right, Dad said. You're the broke one, Marcus. And I say that with love, but it's true. Still renting. Still driving that old Civic. Still doing the same consulting thing you were doing 7 years ago. The table went quiet for just a moment. Not because they disagreed, because they were all nodding. Everyone has their own pace, Mom offered weakly. No, Dad said firmly. At some point, pace becomes excuse. Marcus is 42 years old. Derek owns 4 properties. Claire is a VP. Marcus is still playing consultant. I wouldn't say playing, I started. What would you call it? Dad challenged. You don't own property. You don't have equity. You don't have assets. What exactly do you have? Fascinating question, I said quietly. I pulled out my phone. Dad was still talking. The problem with consulting is there's no leverage. You trade time for money. You'll never scale. You'll never build real wealth. I opened my banking app and navigated to my corporate management portal. Real wealth, Dad continued, comes from owning things. Property. Businesses. Assets that appreciate while you sleep. Not charging hourly fees to move other people's money around. Derek jumped in. Dad's right. You should really think about. 1 second, I said politely, typing an email to my business banker. Are you seriously checking your phone right now? Claire asked. We're having a family moment. Almost done, I said. The email was brief. Stephen, execute immediate withdrawal of all credit facilities from Anderson Construction per the terms of our revolving agreement. File the required notifications. Freeze the line effective end of business today. Standard 48-hour notice period applies as per contract. MA. I hit send. Sorry, I said, putting my phone away. What were you saying? Dad's face was red. I was saying that you need to start thinking about real wealth. About building something substantial instead of just. His phone rang. He glanced at it, irritated. It's the office. I should, he answered. This better be important, Linda. Linda was his office manager. I'd met her twice during routine audits she didn't know I was conducting through Apex Capital. We watched Dad's expression change. What do you mean Apex Capital called? His voice shifted. A notice of what? Silence. They can't just withdraw the entire credit line. We have contracts pending. We need that facility for. More silence. His face went pale. 48 hours? That's insane. We have payroll on Friday. We have material orders going out. He stood up from the table abruptly. Get me the Apex account manager on the phone. Now. No, I don't care if it's Sunday. This is an emergency. He walked toward the restaurant entrance, phone pressed to his ear. The table sat in stunned silence. What's happening? Mom whispered. Derek pulled out his phone. I'm texting Dad's CFO. Claire looked at me. Do you know anything about Apex Capital? Isn't that the kind of thing you'd know about? I might have heard of them, I said carefully. Can you help? Mom asked. Do you have any contacts who might? Let's wait and see what Dad finds out, I said. Through the restaurant windows, we could see Dad pacing on the sidewalk, gesturing frantically. His face was getting redder. Derek's phone buzzed. He read the message and went pale. The CFO says Apex Capital sent formal notice of credit withdrawal. The entire $4.2 million facility. They have 48 hours before the line freezes and all outstanding draws are called due. Can they do that? Claire asked. If it's in the contract, I said quietly. Most revolving credit agreements include provisions for withdrawal at lender discretion with proper notice. How do you know that? Derek asked. I read contracts sometimes. Dad came back to the table. He wasn't sitting down. We have to go. There's a crisis at the office. The lawyers need to review our Apex agreement immediately. What happened? Mom asked, gathering her purse. I don't know, Dad said. They won't tell me anything except that they're exercising some clause in our agreement. Linda's trying to get someone on the phone who can explain what's happening. He threw cash on the table, enough to cover the check and tip, and started for the door. Marcus, he called back. You coming to the office? We might need someone who understands finance. It was the first time in 7 years he'd suggested my skills might be useful. I'll meet you there, I said. I didn't go to the office right away. Instead, I drove to my apartment, made coffee, and pulled up the Anderson construction file on my laptop. Every draw, every payment, every term and condition of the credit agreement I'd structured 3 years ago. The withdrawal clause was on page 47, section 12.3. Lender reserves the right to terminate this facility with 48 hours written notice in the event of material change in lender's risk assessment or strategic priorities. It was standard language. Every revolving credit agreement had something similar. Most lenders never used it. But I wasn't most lenders. My phone started ringing. Dad. I let it go to voicemail. Then Derek. Voicemail. Then Mom. Marcus, honey, your father is frantic. He needs help. Can you please call him back? I waited an hour. Then I called Jennifer. You executed the withdrawal, she asked. I did. How do you feel? Ask me in 48 hours. Marcus, you know this is going to. I know, I said. That's why I'm doing it. I called Dad back at 3 p.m. Marcus, thank God. He sounded wrecked. I need you to look at this contract. The lawyers are saying Apex Capital can withdraw the entire facility, but there has to be something we can do. Some way to negotiate. Send me the agreement, I said. Already done. Check your email. Can you review it today? We have less than 48 hours before the credit line freezes, Anne. I'll look at it now. I pretended to read the document I'd written 3 years ago. After 20 minutes, I called him back. Dad, I reviewed the agreement. The withdrawal clause is ironclad. Apex Capital has the right to terminate with 48 hours notice. There's no negotiation clause, no arbitration requirement, no recourse. Silence. That can't be right, he said finally. We've been perfect clients. Every payment on time. No defaults. No breaches. Why would they just pull out? The clause doesn't require a reason, I said. Just notice. Can I offer them better terms? Higher interest? Additional collateral? You can try, I said. But if they've made the decision to withdraw, they've probably already factored in their position. What does that mean? It means they might not be interested in continuing the relationship at any terms. I heard him breathing on the other end. Heavy, labored breaths. Marcus, if this credit line disappears, we're in serious trouble. We have 3 active projects that need draws this week. We have payroll on Friday. We have material suppliers expecting payment. Without that facility. I understand. Can you help me find alternative financing? You know people, right? You do this for a living. It was the first time in 7 years he'd acknowledged that my consulting might actually involve expertise. I can make some calls, I said. But Dad, you need to understand something. When a major lender pulls out suddenly, it sends a signal to other lenders. They'll want to know why. But there is no why. We're a good client. Then there must be something in their risk assessment that changed. Something they saw that concerned them. Like what? I don't know, I said. But other lenders will assume there's something. That's going to make bridge financing very difficult to secure in 48 hours. The silence stretched. What do I do? He asked quietly. It was the first time I'd ever heard my father ask that question. The first time he'd admitted he didn't have the answer. Contact your CFO, I said. Run scenarios on what happens if the credit line disappears. Figure out which projects you can complete with existing cash. Which ones you'll need to halt. Start talking to your largest clients about payment acceleration if possible. That's surrender, he said. That's giving up. That's triage, I corrected. That's making sure the company survives the next 48 hours. He hung up without saying goodbye. The family group chat exploded that evening. Derek, Dad's company is in crisis. Whoever can help financially should help. Claire, how much are we talking? Derek, probably $50,000 each to bridge the gap until he secures new financing. Mom, of course we'll help. Marcus, can you contribute? I stared at the messages. 7 years. 247 documented comments about my finances, my choices, my apparent failure to build real wealth. And now they wanted $50,000. I typed, I'll need to think about it. Derek, this is Dad's company. Our family legacy. What's there to think about? Me, I need to review my cash position. Claire, you don't have $50,000 saved? After 7 years of consulting. The question hung there in the chat. I didn't respond. Instead, I poured another coffee and pulled up my portfolio. $8.3 million in liquid assets. Another $4.7 million in equity positions. Real estate holdings in 3 states. The Apex Capital portfolio generating $340,000 annually in fee income. I could write a check for $50,000 without thinking about it. But I wouldn't. Not because I wanted Dad to fail. But because this entire crisis, the scrambling, the panic, the sudden recognition that maybe Marcus knows something about finance, this was the lesson. Not for him. For me. I needed to understand whether this family could only value me when they needed me. Whether respect only came with crisis. Whether my worth was only visible when it served their purposes. The answer came the next day. Dad called an emergency family meeting at his office. Required attendance. No excuses. I arrived to find Derek, Claire, and Mom already seated around the conference table. Dad was pacing. His CFO, Robert, sat grimly with a laptop open. "Thank you all for coming," Dad started. "We're facing a critical situation. As you know, our credit facility has been withdrawn. We have," he checked his watch, 36 hours before the line freezes. "What have the lawyers said?" Derek asked. "The contract is airtight. Apex Capital has every right to withdraw. No recourse, no negotiation." "Have you found alternative financing?" Claire asked. "Robert." Dad nodded to his CFO. Robert cleared his throat. "We've approached 4 commercial lenders. All declined. When they learned our primary facility was pulled, they assumed elevated risk. We've also contacted 3 private capital groups. 2 passed. 1 is considering, but they want 14% interest and first position on all company assets." "That's predatory," Derek said. "That's our only option," Robert replied. Dad sat down heavily. "Which brings us to why you're here. The family needs to step up. We need bridge capital to cover the next 60 days while we restructure. I'm asking each of you to contribute what you can." He looked at Derek. "You have equity in your properties. You could take out a line of credit." Derek nodded slowly. "I could probably get $75,000. Dad looked at Claire. "Your salary and bonuses, you should have savings." "I can do $60,000, Claire said. "But I'll need it back within 6 months." Dad looked at Mom. "The house is paid off. We could take a home equity loan." Mom's eyes widened. "Put the house at risk." "It's temporary," Dad insisted. "Just until we stabilize." Then he looked at me. The room went quiet. "Marcus," Dad said carefully, "I know your consulting doesn't generate the same kind of income as, well, but anything you could contribute would help. Even $20,000 or $25,000. I met his eyes. "That's a significant amount." "I know. And I wouldn't ask if it wasn't an emergency." "When you say contribute, do you mean loan or investment?" Dad hesitated. "Loan. With interest, of course. Fair terms." "What rate?" "What? What interest rate?" He looked confused. "I don't know. Whatever's fair. 6%? 7%? The private capital group offered 14%, I pointed out. "That's predatory," Dad repeated. "Your family." "Right," I said. "Family." I pulled out my phone and opened a file. "I've been documenting something. I'd like to share it with everyone." "Marcus, this really isn't the time," Dad started. "It's exactly the time," I said. I started reading. March 2018. "Dad, consulting, that's what people call unemployment." September 2019. "Derek, still playing consultant." December 2020. "Claire, some people think small, stay small." This morning. "Dad, you're the broke one, Marcus." I looked up. I have 247 documented instances over 7 years of this family dismissing my career, my finances, and my business acumen. 247. The room was completely silent. "And now," I continued, "you want me to loan $20,000 to save a company that you've spent 7 years implying I'm not smart enough to understand." "That's not fair," Dad started. "Isn't it?" I pulled out another document. This is a summary of my actual financial position, prepared by my accountant for this exact moment. I handed it to Dad. His hands shook as he opened it. His face went white. "This says your worth. This can't be." $8.3 million in liquid assets, I said. Another $4.7 million in equity positions. Various real estate holdings. Annual income last year of $1.4 million. Derek grabbed the document. His mouth fell open. You have $8.3 million and you asking if you can afford to help, he said incredulously. No, I corrected. You're asking me to help. I'm deciding whether I want to. Claire was staring at the document. How did you? When did you? I've been building this for 7 years, I said. While you all assumed I was broke. Mom's voice was small. Why didn't you tell us? Because you never asked, I said simply. You assumed. You decided who I was and what I was worth. And when I didn't correct you, you took it as confirmation. Dad was still staring at the document. Apex Capital Solutions, that's listed here as one of your holdings. Yes. You own Apex Capital. Technically, I'm the principal investor and managing director, but yes. The realization hit him like a physical blow. You, he breathed. You're the one who withdrew our credit line. I am. Why? His voice cracked. Why would you destroy? I'm not destroying anything, I said calmly. I'm withdrawing capital from a business relationship that was no longer aligned with my values. What values? Dad stood up, his voice rising. Destroying your father's company. No, I said, refusing to continue subsidizing someone who spent 7 years telling me I didn't understand business. Who called me broke every Sunday while spending money I provided. Who needed me to be a failure so he could be a success. That's not. Isn't it? I stood up too. Dad, I gave you a $4.2 million credit facility 3 years ago. I restructured terms 6 times when you were late on payments. I approved expansions you weren't qualified for. I kept your company afloat while you lectured me about real wealth. You never told me. I shouldn't have had to, I said. You should have wondered. You should have asked. You should have considered for even 1 second that maybe your broke son knew what he was doing. Robert, the CFO, spoke up quietly. The Apex terms, they were very favorable. Below market rate. Flexible covenants. I remember thinking we'd won the lottery. You did, I said. You got capital from someone who wanted you to succeed despite having every reason to let you fail. Dad sat back down. He suddenly looked very old. So what now? He asked quietly. You pull the funding and watch the company collapse. That's up to you, I said. What does that mean? The withdrawal notice includes a buyout clause, I said. You have 48 hours to secure alternative financing and pay off the outstanding draws. If you can do that, great. If you can't, Apex has the option to convert the debt to equity. Equity? Derek said. You'd own part of Dad's company. Potentially up to 60%, depending on the outstanding balance and asset valuation, I said. It's in Section 19 of the agreement. The part no one apparently read. Dad's face went from white to gray. You'd take my company. I'd become a majority stakeholder in a company I've been funding for 3 years, I corrected. There's a difference. This is revenge, Clay said. You're punishing him for, what? Hurting your feelings. No, I said, standing up. I'm establishing a boundary. For 7 years, I gave capital, support, and expertise while being treated like I had none of those things. I'm done doing that. I picked up my bag. You have 34 hours to find alternative financing. If you can't, we'll discuss the equity conversion. Either way, Apex Capital will no longer be providing unsecured credit to people who don't respect where it comes from. I walked to the door. Marcus, Mom said, her voice breaking. Please. He's your father. I stopped. I know, I said quietly. That's why I gave him 3 years. That's why I kept him afloat. That's why I'm still giving him 34 hours to figure this out. But being family doesn't mean accepting disrespect. It doesn't mean funding your own diminishment. What do you want from me? Dad asked. I turned to look at him. Really look at him. The man who taught me to ride a bike. Who came to my baseball games. Who told me he was proud when I got my banking job, right before I quit it to start consulting. I wanted you to see me, I said. That's all. I wanted you to ask about my work instead of dismissing it. To wonder about my business instead of assuming it was small. To consider that maybe the broke kid understood something about wealth that you didn't. I see you now, he said. Because you need me, I replied. That's not the same thing. I left. The next 34 hours were chaos. Dad called 17 times. I didn't answer. Derek sent long texts about family loyalty and forgiveness. I didn't respond. Claire left a voicemail crying about how I was tearing the family apart. I deleted it. Mom sent one text, "Your father is heartbroken. I hope you're satisfied." I wasn't satisfied. I wasn't triumphant. I wasn't even angry anymore. I was just tired. Tired of performing. Tired of being small so others could be big. Tired of protecting people from consequences they'd earned. At hour 36, Jennifer called. Anderson Construction just got bridge financing, she said. From who? Private Capital Group. 14% interest. First position on all assets. Personally guaranteed by your father. So they'll pay off the Apex draws. Wire transfer initiated. Should clear by end of business today. I felt something strange. Not disappointment, exactly. Maybe anticlimax. So that's it? I asked. That's it, Jennifer confirmed. They met the terms. The withdrawal completes, they pay off their balance, and the relationship ends. No equity conversion. No equity conversion. I thanked her and hung up. Part of me was relieved. I didn't actually want to own Anderson Construction. I didn't want to fight my father in boardrooms and destroy what he'd built. But another part of me recognized the truth. He'd chosen 14% predatory interest over admitting his son was right. He'd personally guaranteed a loan, putting everything at risk, rather than acknowledge my expertise. He'd rather lose everything to strangers than owe anything to me. That told me everything I needed to know. The Sunday brunch happened anyway. I almost didn't go. But something made me, maybe curiosity, maybe closure, maybe just exhaustion. I arrived late. Everyone was already seated. The conversation stopped when I walked in. Marcus, Mom said carefully. We weren't sure you'd come. I wasn't sure either, I said, sitting down. The silence stretched. No one knew what to say. How to start. Finally, Dad spoke. The lawyers explained the Apex agreement, he said. All of it. The favorable terms. The extensions. The restructuring. You kept the company alive for 3 years. I said nothing. And I never knew. Never asked. Never even wondered who Apex Capital was or why they were being so generous. No, I agreed. You didn't. Why? Claire asked. Why not just tell us? Why play these games? It wasn't a game, I said. It was a test. I wanted to see if success would change how you treated me. If maybe, once Dad's company was stable and Derek's portfolio grew and Claire's career advanced, someone would stop and ask, hey, how's Marcus doing? What's he actually working on? We did ask. You asked if I was still consulting, I corrected. You never asked what that meant. What my clients were. What I was building. You asked so you could confirm what you already believed, that I was failing. Derek looked down at his plate. You want to know the saddest part? I continued. I wasn't even hiding. My website lists my clients. My LinkedIn shows my growth. My office has 23 employees. Anyone who spent 5 minutes looking would have known exactly what I was doing. We should have looked, Mom said quietly. Yes, I said. You should have. Dad cleared his throat. I secured alternative financing. Paid off the Apex balance. The company is safe. I know. Jennifer told me. 14% interest, he said. Personally guaranteed. If anything goes wrong, I lose everything. That was your choice. I couldn't, he stopped. Started again. I couldn't accept help from you. Not after what I'd said. Not after realizing what I'd done. So pride was more important than practicality. Yes, he said simply. And I know that's stupid. But yes. I looked at him, really looked at him for the first time in years. He was smaller than I remembered. Older. More tired. Dad, I didn't pull the funding to punish you, I said. I pulled it because I realized something. You didn't disrespect me because you thought I was failing. You thought I was failing because you needed to disrespect me. Your identity as the successful businessman required someone else to be less successful. I was just convenient. That's not. It is, I said firmly. And the worst part is, I enabled it. I stayed small so you could stay big. I hid my success so you didn't have to examine yours. I let you believe what you wanted because it was easier than fighting for recognition. What do you want from me? He asked. The same question from 34 hours ago. But this time, I had a better answer. I want you to understand that wealth isn't just assets, I said. It's not just property or equity or credit lines. Real wealth is knowing your own value and not needing anyone else to diminish themselves so you can feel successful. I do know. No, I interrupted. If you knew, you wouldn't have spent 7 years calling me broke. You wouldn't have needed me to be the broke one so you could be the rich one. You would have just been proud of what you built without needing to compare it to what I hadn't. The table was completely silent. I'm worth $8.3 million, I said. But the number doesn't matter. What matters is that I built something I'm proud of, and I didn't need to make anyone else small to do it. That's the wealth I want. That's the legacy I want. I stood up. I'm going to go now. Not because I'm angry, but because I don't think we have anything else to say to each other right now. Maybe in time, we'll figure out a different dynamic. One where we're all just people who are proud of what we've built without needing to rank it. Marcus, Dad said. I'm sorry. For all of it. You're not the broke one. You never were. I know, I said. But thank you for saying it. I left the restaurant, got in my Honda Civic, which I genuinely liked, and drove home. My phone buzzed with messages. Jennifer, board meeting tomorrow new investment opportunities. Another message from a client, closing the deal Friday. Thanks for everything. A text from a mentee I'd been advising, got the promotion. Your guidance made all the difference. I smiled. I didn't need Sunday brunches to know my worth. I didn't need Dad's approval or Derek's respect or Claire's recognition. I had something better. I had the quiet confidence of someone who built real wealth, not by diminishing others, but by lifting them up. Not by being the richest person in the room, but by being the person who helped others build their own wealth. That was a legacy worth more than any credit line. And nobody could withdraw it.